Hello, this is Andrew, stuck in Russia. So, things I like about Russia. Okay. I love Russian culture. I love Russian pre revolutionary culture. Like, my family, like I said, left Russia after revolution and eventually came to America. And, uh, you know, they always preserve their Russian culture, which is cool. And, uh, and, but I rebelled against it, like I said, and everything. I'm still rebelling against it. But then we moved to another state when I was like 12, and I made friends with the next door neighbors, and their father was like the most influential person in my life. Absolutely. He was a very intellectual person, um, extremely. And he was a Rusophile too and loved everything Russian. Um, he would like I'd come to visit his son, and then he'd uh, start talking to me, and he'd tell me all about literature and philosophy. And I loved literature ever since I was a little kid. Like I said, I started reading Shakespeare when I was 9. Um, but I kind of wasn't into the Russian thing because I was rebelling. Okay, but he taught me about philosophy, and we had hours and hours of conversations together throughout my life until I moved to Russia. Fascinating conversations, often throughout the entire night. And he got me into Dostoevsky, and Dostoevsky is my favorite writer. Uh, I mainly, uh, I mainly like British literature, not necessarily American literature for some reason, but British literature and German literature and Russian literature. And it's because my friend's dad really got me into it and started telling me about Dostoevsky and everything. So I love Dostoevsky. I loved his like deep psychological insight into people and into people's suffering and how they can redeem themselves from their suffering, or how they can find positive things in their suffering and then redeem themselves. Uh, Not all of these characters do, of course, but it's just I love the philosophical, psychological aspects of Dostoevsky and how he describes everything so wonderfully and just in such detail and so beautifully and so vividly, even if it's not beautiful. It's could be horrific. It could be, but no, yeah, she became a really big influence on my life, and my friend's dad and Dostoevsky also. So yeah, Russian writer is like great, pre-revolutionary. Okay, so my family escaped from Russia after the revolution, and they despise everything Soviet and communist, and that's one thing they brought me up to. And they tried to bring me up to be really religious, and it worked for a while, but then I rebelled. But the fact that I hate everything Soviet and communist, that stuck with me. And I argue with my son sometimes because his grandfather is like this uh, communist. It's like I didn't become part of the Communist Party because I didn't think I was worthy of it, and that just wants to make me puke. And my son thinks, oh, things are so much better in the Soviet Union because his father tells him that. And I argue with him that in 80 years they killed 80 million people of their own people. Anyway, back to culture. Writers like Dostoevsky, Turgenev, Lermontov, Pushkin. I mean, they're just no, some of my favorite writers. Um, yeah, Russia had especially in like the 19th century, they had just this. renaissance of wonderful, deep culture, right? And yeah, it really inspires me, and just really just to sit back on the beach in the summer, I would just sit and read Dostoevsky or Lermontov or something. Or Goethe. I still love my writers from other countries also, of course. So also Russian architecture against again pre-revolutionary. So let's go back before this time of Peter the Great, when he introduced Western influences. Russian architecture was mainly about churches and monasteries, and yeah, their churches are beautiful. Um, doesn't matter if you're religious or not. You can't deny that the buildings are beautiful. It's like powerful structures with these gigantic golden domes on top of them, right? And earlier they had the Greek kind of domes, which is just a regular dome, but then they developed their special Russian onion domes, right? And it's so unique and so different and really so beautiful and awe-inspiring, and like monasteries are like fortresses. They're surrounded by gigantic walls because at the time they were fortresses. When the Mongols invaded, all the people would go into the monasteries for protection. And yeah, the architecture is really unique and really interesting. And whether you're religious or not, if you see a church, a Russian church, go into a Russian church, and the insides are so beautiful and just so, with all the candles lit and all the icons and the beautiful music, and it's a wonderful aesthetic experience, whether you're religious or not. It's a beautiful aesthetic experience, and very ancient aesthetic experience. And then Peter the Great came along and introduced more Western styles and everything, which is great. He built St. Petersburg, which is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe and my favorite city in Russia. And so many beautiful palaces uh, and so many beautiful museums and buildings. Oh yeah, no, Moscow, the Kremlin, Moscow's Kremlin was actually built by Italian architects. But what they did, they traveled through all of Russia to see traditional Russian architecture, and they basically designed Moscow Kremlin not according to like Italian Renaissance ideas, but according to Russian traditional Russian ideas. So you don't see much of the Renaissance in Moscow's Kremlin. You see traditional Russian with some with like new techniques in buildings and military fortifications. But otherwise, yeah, the Italian Renaissance architects realized that I love Italian Renaissance so also, and they realized like how special traditional Russian architecture is, and they worked with it to make a architecture that really became like the soul of the people. Although architecture before was the soul of the people, but I think you know what I mean. So they mixed it together without like putting real Western influence on it. In Petersburg, it's different. It's very Western city in a way, but also a very Russian city. And the museums are wonderful, especially in Moscow and Petersburg. And so my aunt was in a museum in Petersburg, I think the Hermitage, uh, and she saw a mother and a little girl, and they're like going through an area with like Fabergé eggs and stuff, and just Fabergé stuff and all kinds of beautiful porcelain or whatever. And the girl asked, "Why is it that in the old days everything was so beautiful, but now everything is so boring and dull?" And my aunt looked over to the parent and said, "In the mouth of babes, out of the mouth of babes," which is from the Bible. Out of the mouth of babes comes the truth. Yeah, because Soviet Union tried to destroy the entire pre-revolutionary culture, but they couldn't destroy Dostoevsky and Pushkin and Lermontov. So they had to try to twist their works into like as if they were promoting Soviet communism system, which certainly Dostoevsky never did. He wrote a whole book against the rising of socialism and everything. Um, and as far as architecture, so it's just where utilitarianism. You just have these disgusting, ugly block buildings with nothing beautiful, nothing aesthetic about it. It just looks like prisons for citizens. I go and even like the apartment building I live in. It's just like so drab and just like so my apartment's cool, but the outside is just like I go by buildings all the time, and they look just like prisons for workers. I don't know how, or it's just they didn't have this aspect of making buildings beautiful. It just had to be utilitarian, used for a purpose. And just Soviet literature, I don't even read. I read Maxim Gorky, some stuff, and it was kind of cool, but I just, my parents did a good job in making me hate Sovietism and communism. Um, so yeah, I love the culture of pre-revolutionary Russia, especially the 19th century Russia. And a lot of history was rewritten. The Victor Reit's history, of course, was rewritten by the Soviets. So a lot of things they say, how the czars were so horrible and everything, is a lot of bullshit. And that can be a whole nother video, and I probably will do that. But yeah, and people today, it's like, yeah, okay. In school, they're made to learn poems by Lermontov or by Pushkin or by both by heart and everything. I never remember being made to learn poems by famous American poets by heart, and that's cool. And so yeah, they still really respect their traditions, and now that they're not communist anymore, and like I said, my 15-year-old said that if she could go back in time, she would stop Pushkin from being killed in a duel so he could write more. So, yeah, they really should respect their past. But now, yeah, yeah. But in general, in the modern age, nobody creates wonderful, great things anymore that will be immortal. I mean, what do you have for music today? Rap music? I don't know. Lady Gaga? I don't know anything about pop culture. I don't know about pop culture, but I can't even really give you many names. But I've heard it, and I know it's just like nothing. Today's day and age cannot produce a Mozart, a Beethoven, a Wagner, a Shakespeare, a Goethe, a Da Vinci, a Michelangelo. They just cannot do it. Why? One of the things is because we're too obsessed with making money and personal success. Like Van Gogh, he only sold one painting in all of his life. but he's immortal, uh, even though he died in poverty. But people today just care about making money, making their lives good for themselves, and they don't care about really creating something that will last forever. In the past, it was more about giving something to society that will last forever. That'll last 500 years. That'll last 1,000 years. Okay? But today it's just like, as long as I'm happy, I gotta make a life for myself so I'm happy, my family's happy, okay? And whatever. Just not that sense of creativity. I don't know. Tell me one classical composer, like say in the last 50 years that I've been alive, one great classical composer, one great writer. No, like Stephen King or something, some really deep writer that will be immortalized forever. Some great artist. I can't think of one great artist in the last 50 years that I lived. Not one person that can compare to Michelangelo, to Da Vinci. It's just, it's not, it's not what motivates people anymore. Before, that's what motivated a lot of people to create something beautiful, to create something that will be eternal as long as this world exists. And now that's not important to people anymore. They're a lot more shallow. So yeah, what I love about Russia is their pre-revolutionary culture. I despise their communist culture, which I argue with my son about. Anyway, so Russia's not all bad. Goodbye. Think of some, okay. Think of some composer, writer, or artist that really has changed the world, or really has been something incredibly influential in the last 50 years, like Mozart, Beethoven, uh, Dostoevsky has been, um, Michelangelo, and so forth. Think, there's no one. The great era of creativity, which actually lasted like for thousands of years, has died. Okay, bye from Russia.